But when I started testing my blood sugar, I realized that, okay, wow, I'm having poor responses to carbohydrate in the foods that I'm eating that, someone else my age is, eating the same thing and they're able to tolerate it, very well. I later discovered that I had PCOS. So the hormone imbalance.
Oh, wow.
It was making it so I was less tolerant of carbohydrates. So, and I'm fortunate that I was able to detect this earlier on and just be able to recognize it. I don't remove carbohydrates completely. I'm just more cognizant of how I implement it. I used to eat carbs way more than I do now. So I'm just more moderate with it. I'm fortunate that I was able to see this because, over time with those persistent hits on my metabolism, that's inflammatory.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to I Think I Can podcast, a place where I will teach you to think differently in order for you to get different results. So today I have with me Molly Downey. She's a registered dietitian who specializes in glucose control, metabolism, and weight loss. She graduated from Indiana University, Bloomington, and currently works as a nutrition manager at Nutrisense, a health technology company which leverages continuous glucose monitors, abbreviated as CGMs, as a way to optimize diet, health, and overall well-being. So thanks, Molly, for coming on today. I was curious, like my listeners, I think know me by now that I'm always want to learn. So when I found out about such, gadgets as continuous glucose monitors, I was really interested, and also coming from the functional medicine field, right? I see what spikes in insulin and glucose does, to a person's physiology, and how that all ties in with also as a psychotherapist with the mind-body connection. I was curious to try this on myself. So I slapped this gadget on my arm for the last week and a half. And, we can talk all about that, but, and read the data on the phone, and you can help me interpret my data. But, I just like, maybe we'll just start off by, because I don't know, I think probably, maybe 20% of my listeners know about this sort of stuff. They probably know about, if they have someone that has type 1, type 2 diabetes, they might have heard of such things. But other than that, maybe people don't even know about blood glucose and what it does to the body. So if you want to begin by just kind of telling people why this is important, why we should have knowledge about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Molly. I am one of the nutrition managers at Nutrisense. And like you said, we use these continuous glucose monitors. I'll be referring to it as a CGM, just to translate. But essentially what the CGM does is, as you were saying, you place it on the back of your arm, and it consistently picks up on your blood sugar levels for a 14-day period. We use the Freestyle Libre, so that just monitors your levels for the 14-day period, but it's 24 hours a day for that entire time. So it's different if anyone is familiar with a glucose meter. You can get this from a pharmacy or drugstore, and it's associated with the diabetes population because they do those finger pricks. And the difference here is that it's just that single snapshot in time. So if you do one finger prick, that's your blood sugar level at that moment in time, where the continuous glucose monitor, you're able to recognize these trends in how your blood sugar is fluctuating throughout the day. Because even if you wear the continuous glucose monitor CGM for even a week or so, as you just mentioned, you'll notice that your blood sugar is consistently fluctuating, and there's trends that you can decipher with the CGM. There's so many different variables that play into this. I've seen so much information now at this point, and I'm still fascinated. I'm always continuing to learn with the different responses that people have, but primarily the variables that are we're seeing play out in the data is, of course, how you're responding to specific food. We can go into detail with that a little bit more. How you're responding to stress, how you respond to, a poor sleep, or how your sleep quality is impacting your glucose levels overall. And then exercise also has a large impact on your levels. So we see all these things play out in the data. So the whole point of it is to recognize your personal responses. So where you might, eat something and have a normal response, a healthy response to it, I may eat the exact same food, depending on the situation, and I could have a poor response from it. So with this day and age, there's so much information out there with, what, people are coming out. It's like, oh, you should be eating this, you should be eating that. It's so convoluted and stressful to even think, especially if you're trying to, put forth that effort to start making these behavior changes, and then you just feel overwhelmed because you don't even know what to do. So I think the personalized aspect and being able to individualize it to your specific, physiological responses that are occurring in response to all these variables is how you can work to then tweak and modify and optimize your glucose levels based on, what we're seeing.
Exactly. Yeah, like because we don't want to become too hyper focused. Yeah, like this is interesting because especially as a psychotherapist that works with a lot of individuals that have like poor relationship with food, or eating disorders, for example. We don't want people to become even more hyper focused on the types of food, but maybe we should be, yeah, also speaking a lot about, how helpful these devices will be in terms of giving us insight towards what you said, like what optimizing your sleep does, what getting out in nature does for you, what meditation might do for you. I think that's super exciting because, yeah, because I think a lot of people have always said, okay, well, I mean, especially because of, the diabetics and the diabetic world, it's sort of, oh, yeah, your insulin, your glucose has dropped, your insulin has dropped, you're hypoglycemic now, you need to take some honey, you need to bring that sugar up, etc. And that's was, like sort of the birth of these CGMs, right? It's sort of to help in real time with that. But rather than doing the pin pricking all the time and drawing blood, I mean, that, this is so much easier. However, yeah, people have just become a little bit too dogmatic, I think, in terms of, this food is good or bad. I mean, like I'm sure there are certain foods that are more inflammatory for some person than another, but we also have to realize that maybe when you ingest that food is going to make a big impact. Late night eating, this is why late night eating is not good for you, or this is why yeah, whatever different combinations of food, this is why we want to add maybe some fat along with that carbohydrate, or whatever that might be. Yeah, it just gives us real data instead of always trying to guess and get stressed out about it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about my data. Like I okay, and actually, why don't you explain too, once you get the CGM, you're able to work with a nutritionist, correct?
Yes, exactly. So when you do get, if you with Nutrisense, if you do sign up for the program, then you get paired with a dietitian. We don't expect everyone to have a full understanding of what glucose data means. So then we have that dietitian there to help
Mm-hmm.
decipher trends. And again, you mentioned a few critical points in what you were just saying with, people who are struggling to figure out what to eat, or perhaps they have had disordered eating in the past, or they're struggling with the right foods to eat, or they have phobias towards specific foods.
Mm-hmm.
I think the CGM is great. It's totally dependent on the person, and you're absolutely, it could potentially promote more negative effects on some people who are more susceptible to that data, and if anything seems out of range, maybe it promotes that, further issues with that. But with someone who, say, they have like a carb phobia, or they've heard, oh, I can never eat this because
Mm-hmm.
this is so bad for you,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's encouraging when you're wearing the CGM and maybe you don't have super poor responses to those carbohydrate. And I think, there are more healthful carbohydrates, and there are ones that, most people have more issues with. But if, say someone is getting involved in the keto diet because they heard that that's, what's going on right now, but it's not something that is sustainable for that person. It can be sustainable for some people, but maybe not for that person. So I would think it would be very encouraging if you come utilize a CGM and recognize that, oh, wow, I actually can tolerate these healthful carbohydrates in, decent amounts and not have a very poor response as I was anticipating. That allows them for more liberty in the foods that they're choosing, and ultimately then less stress in their food decisions on a daily basis, because they're not, so stressed thinking, oh my gosh, if I'm eating, this carbohydrate, I'm going to have a poor response. And, I heard that it's not good for me. And then, then that cycle of negative thinking then is continued on. So I think it can be helpful in that sense for some people. With the stress that you were discussing as well, sure, there, may be people that come on and they feel that looking at the CGM data could be stressful. I think that would just be dependent on the person. But ultimately, I think a lot of people like it for the accountability aspect. So say, it's kind of just this mental thing. I know whenever I'm wearing the CGM, I don't know if you felt this at all, but if, it's really easy if there's, food laying around or a snack or candy, who knows, it kind of makes you just double think. Like, you don't want that. That's not going to be something that's satisfying. So kind of, if you're not wearing the CGM, you're like, okay, I can get away with this. But if you are wearing it, you don't want to do it, because then you're going to have that response and you almost don't want to see it. So I think it's great for that accountability aspect of it. I don't know if you
you don't really want to see that spike, that, that's going to be there once you look at it. So let's talk a little bit about those, like, okay, so, I know not everybody obviously has used this, but it comes out on your phone, like everything's picked up on your phone. That's how you read your data. And it's sort of like a graph that's shown. So you're going to see peaks and valleys sort of thing, throughout your day. You can program it to, remind you to scan, which was very helpful for me, because otherwise I would not have done it. And then, for each scan that you do, you have the option to add the meal, to describe the meal, or make some sort of note. Because the notes are helpful. Like, I mean, because it might be I had a really stressful session, or I found out some really bad news, or I just rear-ended somebody in my car. And you could see that, you would get a spike when something like that happens. So, like, to me, that was the most insightful information, I guess, because like I say, as a therapist, I can I can tell my clients over and over how their thoughts and their state of mind and, the type of energy that they're, giving off, plays a huge role in your physiology. And, you can make yourself sick, like physically sick with, I mean, we see that all the time with anxiety or, irritable bowel syndrome, for example, or, um, yeah. So, I mean, people know it, but again, to actually see numbers on a graph is another thing. Like, we can always talk about it, but to actually see numbers on a graph is a different thing. So, and one thing I know I do want to ask you is, see, I'm not sure, like, I don't know if I can show you right now, but you know how it says like 12 a.m. at night, it's
Yeah.
high and then it's going down. So, like, is that a problem? Because, okay, so
It's a really good question. So it is a normal trend to see that your glucose levels are higher overnight than they are during the day. However, we want to, we have a lot of research on fasting blood glucose. So this is like if you wake up in the morning and you haven't eaten for about 8 hours, where are your levels at baseline? But with the, innovation of the CGM, we're now able to monitor levels overnight. If you think about it, before we weren't able to do this because we only had like the finger prick, or it was one snapshot. So now we're able to see this. So we're not fully sure, exact ranges that we should be in, but we've made, general recommendations based on all the data we've seen. We just try to stay at least under 105 milligrams per deciliter. The most important thing here is deciphering trends. So there's so many things that can impact your overnight values. So you might see on the night that you just displayed to me that your levels were a little bit higher. So I'd be curious, okay, let's look back at the other nights, and are your glucose levels more in lower ranges on that night? Then that would tell me, okay, it seems like there is potentially some variable that is promoting these higher levels. What the first thing that I do is I assess, okay, what did you eat the night before? How was your sleep quality? Are you experiencing more stress than usual? And was there any sort of, activity that was going on that, maybe before bed? Everyone does respond differently. Some people, if they do like a workout before bed, then it can promote more stress and their levels can be higher, where some people can do a workout before bed and then their levels are they're lower and in more regulated ranges. So I would say the most common variable is that food that you're eating before bed and falling asleep. So in general, once it's dark out and later on in the evening, we have a decreased insulin sensitivity, which just means that we're less able to uptake our food, especially carbohydrates. So some people, most people struggle with carbohydrates in general later on at night. It's just what we see overall. People struggle with just meals in general at night. So if you eat something and then you fall asleep shortly after, if you think about it, your body didn't really have much time to fully process that meal. So as you're sleeping, your insulin sensitivity is decreased at this time. It's normal to see then that glucose rise overnight as your body's not effectively processing that carbohydrate in meal as it normally would during the day. So, looking at the type of food that you're eating and how long are you waiting until you actually fall asleep, and what's going on there. So, for example, go ahead.
Can I ask, like, are we talking about the tiniest little amounts? Like, yeah, I guess so, right? Like, oh no, well, no, like, is it total glucose load, or is it just a cephalic response of a sweetened food, for example? Like, let's say if I had one sip of Coke at 10 p.m. at night, could that show like a higher glucose response, at 12 p.m. or something like that?
It could. I would say I've seen so many different responses with people, so it really depends. I've had people that can eat or drink something super high carb late at night, and their glucose is still great. Whereas I have someone who, like you said, will just drink like one small bit of Coke or something that's high in sugar, and it truly impacts their overnight values. So that's why I guess experimenting and seeing how you respond. I think some people actually do better with just like a slight bit of carbohydrate before bed. It helps with them falling asleep or staying asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Some people do better with just like high protein snack before bed with sleep quality as well.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I go into everything with just that exploratory mindset of just it's so dependent on the person. So let's like try this and let's experiment with this one night and then let's try this the next night and see if there's any difference in what we're seeing in the data. And and aside from the foods that we're eating, I mentioned sleep as well. So
Yeah.
I'll see on if someone is having higher overnight values and they didn't really, I can't tie it back to the meal that they're eating the night before. I'm asking about sleep quality because,
Mm-hmm.
did you wake up in the night? Were you tossing and turning?
Mm-hmm.
Was there any sort of disruption there? Because there is a relationship between glucose and sleep. So when you're having a poor sleep, your body's recognizing this as a stress response. And this results in your glucose levels being elevated. So you might find that, with a poor night's sleep, then your levels are elevated. And then leading into the next day, your baseline values can be higher because you're still out of sync with your normal circadian rhythms. Those things can be offset. And your body can be in that stressful state, and then you could be responding poorly to foods that you tolerate otherwise well. Just because you're in more of that like stressful environment, then your body can be more reactive and have higher baseline than the next day.
Okay, so then that means I really need to look at what I'm doing, um, like, because it takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours to see what the actual response is, right? It's not like you eat something and then you're going to see a spike right away, right? It takes that time.
Yeah.
So if I'm seeing a spike, it's its highest at about 12 a.m. and
Yeah.
then slowly moving down, I really need to think about what I'm doing around 10 p.m. at night. Sort of, am I having, a snack? I have to say that, like, um, it's pretty consistent that I'm like at about 110, 120 range at 2 a.m. So I should really be doing some different experiments maybe in this next few days to.
I would say, yeah, you can definitely experiment. I would say that some people just have higher baseline value for overnight. And when you do, it's more difficult to nudge. It takes a longer period of time to go down. The little techniques like the foods that you're eating or sleep quality or maybe meditation before bed,
Yeah.
those things, and see if anything has an
Mm,
impact. But overall, I would decipher your baseline and just try to stick with what your baseline is, and then monitor for trends anytime. If your norm is 110, try to decipher anytime that your levels are going out of this range, and try to figure out like, okay, what's
hmm.
happening in these
Okay.
situations.
Okay. Okay. Um, yeah, I will say I really noticed that it's amazing what a walk can do after you eat. Like, I mean, it just drops it right down.
Yeah, it's my favorite technique ever since I started wearing the CGM. It works wonders. And what's happening is, maybe I should backtrack and just, I wonder if your listeners are even
Yeah.
confused about like maybe a response to food, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So most of your responses are going to be from meals that we're eating, particularly carbohydrate. So what happens if we eat something that's higher in carbohydrate, that is going to be, absorbed and infiltrated into your bloodstream. And then that's when we see the increase in blood sugar or blood glucose. Your body then responds by releasing insulin. So it's just the hormone that's going to allow that glucose out of the bloodstream into the cell to then be utilized as energy. Mm-hmm. And then glucose will then start to come back down. So you see that represented in the data. As you said, everything is represented in a graph form from when you're wearing the device. And you'll see a response within, an hour or two after you eat a meal. The idea is it's very normal to spike from a food, especially carbohydrate. That's a normal physiological response. The idea is that we don't want to be going in these super high ranges. We have the current threshold set at 140 milligrams per deciliter. Everyone kind of adjusts it based off of, how they feel, but that's kind of the rough estimate that we keep for most people. The reason being is when your levels go out of this range and are in these higher ranges for an extended period of time, then it increases the susceptibility that you can, further promote cellular damage or inflammation or, any metabolic abnormalities. So we want to avoid that on a consistent basis. It's okay if it happens, from time to time. But the idea is that we just don't want it to be persistent where it's like multiple spikes above threshold sitting there for an extended period of time. So again, we want to see, if you do have a spike, you just want to see it to come back down in a 2 to 3 hour period. And if that makes sense.
Yeah. So like you're saying, like it's okay to have spikes. Like it's normal. It's a normal physiological response, but we don't want it to stay up there.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And one more thing on that, because I do think if someone does try out a CGM and they see that they're having a spike from something, then that may, oh my gosh, I can never eat this food again. Or
right.
That's not the case. And I would hope that the dietitian would help walk you through different modifications that you can use around that food. So as you were saying, different types of, the different time of day has an impact. If you're pairing it with a protein, for example, if you're walking after a meal, these different things can help you modulate that response, more effectively. And again, like with the walking, if you're seeing a spike and you go for a walk after, it just helps dispose of that excess glucose.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So yeah, you see it and then you see your glucose levels come back down. So it's very, very helpful and just, something that I think everyone should just get in the habit of working with, like post-meal walks.
Yeah, post-meal or like any sort of movement, like maybe going up and down, the stairs or moving around your house or, depending on, where you're living. All it would take is probably 5 minutes. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, the muscle is probably what's taking in the glucose at that point, right? And getting it out of the blood.
Yeah, exactly. So that you're right. Any sort of movement is going to be helpful. Even if you're like standing up and walking around, that's going to be better than just sitting on your couch and, watching TV. So anything that's your body moving is going to be super helpful.
Is there any other tips that you can like, whether it's food combinations or, like a time of day, like as you mentioned, is very important. How about or even stuff that you discovered about yourself? What was helpful?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different, techniques that you can work with. As I mentioned, like say you are trying a food out and you tested it later on at night, as I described, you may have more difficulty processing it. So again, I don't want someone to feel like they can't have that food.
Right.
So testing it out then a couple of days later, earlier in the day, and see if you can tolerate it more effectively. Then I work with, I use this a lot with, the idea is if you work out, that post-workout period, typically, in that 2 hour time frame, you're way more tolerant of carbohydrates. And
Mm.
I see this all the time. So say you like eat a bowl of oatmeal and you see a spike. I would suggest trying, a workout and then eating that bowl of oatmeal, in the
Mm.
same portions after your workout and see if you can tolerate it better. For the most part, you can after that workout period. And it's because we're more tolerant of carbohydrates at that time. So I think it's also if
Mm.
someone is struggling with higher swings in glucose or they're concerned about, when to implement their carbohydrates, then
Mhm.
doing it in that post-workout time period is super, super helpful. Again, walking is great. Pairing with protein, I think most people, I feel like this is pretty widely known,
Mhm.
but it truly, truly, truly makes an impact. And it's very satisfying to see in the glucose data as well. So it's kind of the idea of meal sequencing. So say you have a protein on your plate and a carbohydrate like say quinoa or sweet potato and some
Mhm.
roasted veggies. I always try to emphasize the sequencing of how you're eating that meal. So if you eat
Oh.
like the protein first and then the veggie, because that protein helps blunt the response, and then the vegetables are super fibrous and then can also help in regulating that response. It can, and then you eat the carbohydrate, it can help you tolerate the meal much better than if you eat kind of like everything consolidated at once. So,
Interesting. Oh, I never
yeah.
thought of it like that. So like let's say, and we all do this, right? Like I'm just thinking, okay, you're starving, you haven't had a chance to eat most of the day, you walk in the kitchen and you're not grabbing the broccoli in the
Yeah.
crisper. You're grabbing the Doritos and eating the Doritos, while you're preparing your quinoa ready, whatever. Um, but yeah, I have to laugh. Like it's so like you're kind of saying, well, if you like ice cream, maybe put it in your, the green smoothie that you're having after your workout, and chances are it's not going to affect you so much. But
Yeah.
it's funny though. It's like darn it all. Like why do we crave this crap at night? Because we can't, because we're not. Our body definitely doesn't want it at night. It's not responding very nicely at
I
night.
know. It's so
Yeah.
frustrating. It's definitely a frequent trend that, most people have. It's just those intensified cravings later on. And that's the
Mhm.
worst time that we should be eating these types of foods. So
Well,
I think,
I think it's what you said. Like you mentioned how pivotal sleep is. And I know that's one thing I noticed years ago is like, wow, when I didn't get that sleep, like all I want is like carbs and sweet stuff, right? And I used to run long distances. I used to be, running a lot of marathons and stuff like that. And I noticed that, after I stopped doing that, that I did have much less cravings for sweets and carbohydrates and things like that because I think it's because I was overdoing it. I think, and my body was tired, and it's saying please give me more, or or you probably it's probably saying please rest, but I took that as please give me something sweet or something, because we're just trying to like we need that instant like dopamine hit of sugar in our blood to make us perceive that we're feeling better, but I think our body's just saying hey, rest.
yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah. And
mhm.
with the the endurance exercise and doing that on more of a persistent basis, yeah, you're depleting your glucose stores. So
Mhm.
that's all your body just telling you, okay, let's refuel, let's replenish. I think so many athletes that we work with have more difficulty with just that basic. It's just like you need to refuel with the protein, the carbohydrate, healthy fats,
Mhm.
veggies that are full of antioxidants, just to otherwise your body is just going to be in a perpetual state of stress trying to fight and like search for these fuel sources that maybe are not existent. So you need that exogenous input of foods that are going to refuel your body, so that your recovery period is more plentiful. So
Yeah. And so like, yeah, you just reminded me too that these types of devices aren't just for people that, are obviously diabetic or struggling, because there's a lot of unhealthy, fit people out there,
yeah,
that can run, a 10K or, hit the gym really hard, but metabolically they're not necessarily healthy at all. Like there's, the skinny fat people, right? That are
yeah,
out there. They look slim, they look skinny, but they have a lot of, fat around their organs.
yeah,
So,
absolutely. And yeah,
mhm,
I would say we do get the diabetic population, but type 2, we don't
mhm,
work with anyone who has type 1. But yeah, most of the people that we do work with are generally healthy individuals, people that are just curious about their health, and they
mhm,
are athletes, or as you said, you're just a curious person and you want to learn more about your body. I'm the same
mhm,
way. And I think I'm actually a good example of all that. I was always super active, and I run a lot too, and was
mhm.
all involved in athletics and whatnot. But when I started testing my blood sugar, I realized that, okay, wow, I'm having poor responses to carbohydrate in the foods that I'm eating, that you know someone else my age is eating the same thing, and they're able to tolerate it very well.
Hmm.
I later discovered that I had PCOS, so the hormone
Oh,
imbalance was,
wow.
yeah, it was making it so I was less tolerant of carbohydrates. So, and I'm fortunate that I was able to detect this earlier on and just be able to recognize it. I don't remove carbohydrates completely. I'm just more cognizant of how I implement it.
Mm.
I used to eat carbs way more than I do now, so I'm just more moderate with it, and just I'm fortunate that I was able to see this because, over time, with those persistent hits on my metabolism, I was like
Mhm.
constantly having those glucose levels in higher ranges multiple times a day. That's inflammatory. That's stressful on my body.
Exactly.
Later lead to issues, you know, even if we're thinking of like insulin resistance, for example, it's kind of like a buzzword that many people are more familiar with now. And just like
Mhm.
that takes years to develop.
Exactly.
10 years to
Yeah.
develop. So if I'm not being cognizant of that now, like who knows where I'd be 10 years from now. So it's just
Exactly.
a preventative aspect.
So are you saying that that's how you discovered it? It was through wearing the CGM?
Yeah, so I got super interested in just personally because I was having like my own health issues.
Mhm.
I had bad skin. Um, I just had like my energy. I was eating primarily like plant-based, so it was very high
Mm.
carb diet.
Yeah.
And then I started testing my blood sugar and realized, and I was just doing finger pricks at the time. And I was like, whoa, I am definitely having poor responses. And then, I got involved with the CGM and really was able to decipher trends and notice that, yeah, I am having poor responses. And then later, I was going to all these doctors, and then I was later diagnosed with PCOS. I'm like, finally, this makes sense why all of this.
Oh, yeah, very interesting. So, in your cycle, I'm sure was not
Yeah.
optimal.
Yeah, and we notice this a lot with the female cycle too. And you see it play out in the data. So it's like the week leading up to menstruation. So
Mhm.
you're in that luteal phase, your
Mhm.
progesterone is on the rise.
Yeah.
Um, and estrogen is then, estrogen peaks in the first half of your cycle, and then
Yep.
progesterone peaks. So
Yep.
that, then we see, because of that, there's a decreased insulin sensitivity. So someone can,
Mhm.
eat a higher
Mhm.
carbohydrate food during the first half of their cycle, and then the second half of their cycle, they eat that same food, and just like the week leading up to your menstruation, you're like, wow, I'm having a poor response. So, it's very
Exactly.
insightful in that aspect as well. There's
Yeah.
just like the things that you can learn are definitely endless, but it's like a
Yeah.
field.
Yeah.
I was always so curious. I'm like, wow, like I was able to figure this stuff out. So I just want to share with everyone, because I'm like, if you can learn anything that's going to help you on your health journey, it's just like one piece of the puzzle. It's not always, it's not going to
Yeah.
solve issues. There's so many working parts to your health. It's mental, it's physical, there's emotional. It's
Mhm.
just one step at a time, and just working with one small thing, developing that habit around one positive change, and then working with, going from there. So
Well, exactly. And it's not to say a plant-based diet is good or bad again, right? It's sort of like, but your response to it was not good. And but again, like any young woman, they're looking at social media, they're reading magazines, it's in the news, plant place, plant place. And of course you're going to follow the trend, and you're thinking that you're super healthy. And yet, yeah, you got these other symptoms going on, like you say, your skin, you're bloated, you're not sleeping well, and your period's a mess. But hey, I'm eating plant-based. So
yeah,
how did you change your diet then to feel better?
I've experimented with lower carb before. I've experimented with keto, but now I'm more just very balanced. I
Hmm.
incorporate way more animal proteins and
Hmm.
animal sources. I just feel energy wise way
Hmm.
better. So I think just looking at my breakfast, for example, I was eating oatmeal, and
Yep.
it tested out. I saw that I was having very high spike. And this isn't to say that oatmeal wouldn't work great for someone else.
No.
That's the thing. It could work awesome for someone else. It just wasn't my thing. And then I was feeling tired and fatigued the rest of the day. I was having a crash later on in the afternoon. So I switched it out my breakfast to something more along the lines of like, I'll do scrambled eggs with
Hmm.
avocado and berries, or sauteed
Hmm.
veggies. So it is a
Hmm.
lower carb, but the berries are still like low glycemic. I
Hmm.
just feel like with the protein, and it's just more energy dense, that I just feel far more sustained throughout the day. And again, that's just my thing.
Yep.
I just eat, higher protein sources. I really was not eating any sort of meat at all. And
Hmm.
now I do, and it just makes me feel so much better. So,
Mhm.
and again, like with plant-based can be effective for someone, and I've seen people tolerate it well. They feel their best on it. It just, that wasn't my thing. So it's just
Yeah.
like work on modifications around it. So
Okay, perfect. So, is there anything that, like, how long have you been working for Nutrisense?
I've been since August of 2020. We started, I was the, I want to say, fifth dietitian. We now have
Hmm.
40 plus dietitians. So we've grown massively,
How
even in
many?
the, we're at like 40 plus
Oh,
dietitians.
wow. Okay.
So yeah, we've grown a lot in the last even year. So I mean, there was like 10 of us at the time, and now we have close to 100 employees. So it's definitely exciting. And I think the most satisfying thing is, even from my perspective, I felt like, prior to working at Nutrisense, I felt it was more difficult to promote behavior change in people that I
Mm-hmm.
was working with. And this is just more strategic, and I can actually see what's going on. So then
Mm-hmm.
my recommendations should be more insightful from there. I think, yeah, that it's just satisfying to see that. And of course, not everyone's going to have, some mind-blowing,
No.
experience, but it's those people that have struggled and have found that this is able to help them and can help them promote better behavior change. It's like, that's what we're here for. And
Well, I think you're like you are a perfect example. I'm kind of boring. Like I just find like, I like I didn't notice something like in myself that was super off-putting or anything like that. Um, except for maybe it was helpful for me for, managing stress and realizing, and even mindful eating, right? Like even the importance of walking into, you know, a meal and realizing if I'm highly stressed at that point, it's going to affect my 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 glucose response for that
Yeah.
meal.
Yeah.
And who wants that? So, I don't want that. I don't want high spikes. So maybe some deep breathing before you begin that meal, or, putting your fork down between bites, or yeah, just sort of like, giving the body a chance to, yeah, ingest the food properly. And
Yeah.
yeah, that,
Yeah. Breathing exercises are great for,
mhm,
just setting up your body to be in a peaceful state before
mhm.
actually consuming those foods. Because again, like if you're stressed, even if you're thinking about and being stressed out, like, oh, I shouldn't be eating this,
Well,
or
see, exactly.
negatively impacts your physiological response as well. So it's just like being in a healthy state. If you are eating something that's out of your norm, it's like just coming to peace with it, and just like
Exactly.
it's okay. And just like when you're calm, then your body's going to be calm too, and then you can,
Right.
produce
Right.
a better
And
response.
I mean, you're in the health and wellness field too, so there's a lot of talk about gluten, and how inflammatory it is. And yes, there's certain foods out there that are more inflammatory than others: gluten, dairy, soy, corn, etc., processed seed oils. However, like I also heard a lot of people say, yeah, but and when I was in Europe, I I had bread, I had gluten, I didn't feel bloated or anything, and it's because of more restrictions on the use of glyphosate out there, which is Roundup and blah blah blah. But I'm kind of like, or or is it perhaps because you're sitting on a balcony overlooking, whatever? Like, I mean, it's like it's the whole like mindful, like stressless, beautiful, yeah, just enjoyment of being,
Yeah.
in another country like that. And
Right. And
yeah.
it's almost like, because when you're on vacation and you're like, say you're in Italy, for example, it's like
Mhm.
you're mentally allowing yourself to be indulgent and enjoying. So that then in turn, it's like, again, it's that de-stressor on your body, and then allows for that more healthful metabolic response. It's like, it's probably a combination of both, like mental aspect and the actual,
Y-
components of food. But I think
yeah,
can take, you know, you can take that insight and just like take it home, and just, it's just,
exactly.
or, at peace with just the fact that we're humans, we're going to have cravings from time to time, we're imperfect, and it's just, we either are going to put stress on ourselves consistently for not abiding by what we deem as what we should be doing, or we're, it's the mental aspect, and just, being at
Ex-
peace with it, and just like, it's life, and let's just
yeah,
go. So
accepting ourselves. And you don't have to be like yeah, the type A, person, with everything in life. One other thing, I know I should let you go here, but is, did you like, how about do you have any stats like Canadian compared to US? Because I know this is an American company, and I think the other company out there that also, has CGMs is also another American company. So, do you anything like
so
that?
we do ship to Canada. We have not looked at any sort of, analytics or trends
Yeah.
differing between if someone is in America versus Canada.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's actually an interesting thought,
Mm-hmm.
just to see, kind
Mm-hmm.
of if there's any trends going on there. And there are, although we don't ship to, other countries, we do have plenty of people who have gotten the CGM while they're in the US, and then they bring it back over with them. So we do have people from other parts of the world that
Okay.
use the technology. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, that's actually a very interesting thought, and,
Mm-hmm.
something to potentially look into, since we do have all this data. It's just kind of deciphering trends
I think
along the.
that's going to be the most interesting thing that's going to come out of all this is you taking all that data and just, like making some real global, statements about like you said, like in sort of like we see exercise being consistently like an excellent, way of maintaining glucose levels and food combinations or I mean, you know, we all know that Skittles and Fruit Loops is not, what we should be doing. Like, so it's not going to bring out that kind of data, but it's just like, I think all more of the nuances surrounding, um, the combination of what lifestyle does,
Yeah.
which,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is super, super, like, like back to that, example of sitting on a patio, in Rome or something like that. I mean, just the relationships, at that time, you're likely with someone you enjoy being with,
Yeah.
chances are you're not traveling with someone you don't like, you're not working. Um, yeah. And it's just like the smells, the sights, it's like, it's all of that.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Then here we are in the US, like we're driving around, eating food in the car,
e-
just stressed constantly.
e-
So we're
exactly.
gonna play into it.
No
But
wonder. Yeah, no wonder. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's definitely so much to be said about lifestyle, and we get the choice. Like we can choose that. And like with COVID too, that's one thing, right? There's a lot of good things about COVID. We aren't necessarily driving downtown, doing the 9 to 5 and racing back home in traffic and eating on the run between meetings and da 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 da. I
yeah,
mean, so yeah, but that's why I asked when you began, because I was sort of curious. You've only been there throughout COVID.
yeah. I started during the company basically started growing right in the middle of COVID,
Yeah,
right at the beginning of COVID. So,
interesting. Hmm.
um, but also I think it's good too because with COVID, I think people are becoming more invested in their health, and
Mm-hmm.
it's more insight that can help with all that and
Yeah.
metabolic function and figuring out what's going on there. But yeah, we've grown pretty much just primarily during COVID. So
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. Well, I think you're right. Everybody has become much more interested in health now than ever before. So it's good. All right. Well, I think, is there anything else? Oh, I know something. I never asked you this, and I'm not the best at this, but I try to remember to ask all my guests where they had, I think I can moment where kind of thought, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can.
let's see. Um,
Can be
oh,
anything, anything. Oh.
so I just signed up for a triathlon. I've never
Hmm.
done it before. And I signed up for the Chicago Triathlon in August. And I've been thinking on it because I know how to swim. I grew up swimming. I always run in cycling. I've done a race, 100-mile race before. So I feel like I have all the different athletic capabilities for each. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm so excited to train for it. I've always wanted to do a more intense race like that. So yeah, I just
Great.
to a point I'm like, you know what, I can do this. I'm gonna sign up. It's gonna happen. So I'm gonna start training in April. So
Oh, wow. Congrats.
yeah,
That's great. Yeah, good for you. Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thanks so much, Molly, for your time. And I think this is going to be very helpful for our listeners. And we'll link up your stuff in the show notes as we always do. But yeah, you ship to Canada. Anything else that we need to know, like regarding?
um I think, yeah, you can find us on, Facebook, LinkedIn. We're on, our Instagram is Nutrisense.io. We have a
Okay.
lot of great content. So even if on our website, so we have a ton of blogs. You can learn
Mm-hmm.
a great deal of information there. So
Good
yeah,
point.
I just encourage people to explore, to learn something new. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if you ever test out the CGM, that'd be awesome. But It was
Okay.
great talking to you. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Okay. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thanks once again for joining me on another great episode of I Think I Can podcast. If you liked it, please subscribe below so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And until next week, treat each day like it was your last, because each new day is a privilege that we shan't take for granted. Cheers and have a great week. Bye-bye.